Busy streets, towering skyscrapers, new businesses opening every week. These are the signs of a town that's alive, thriving, and winning. But what happens when they lose their sense of purpose? Here are 5 dead American towns crushed under the weight of an economic collapse. Number 1. Flint, Michigan. Once a thriving industrial city of nearly 250,000 people at its peak, Flint has since dwindled to less than 80,000, far less than the number of people General Motors once employed throughout the city. But while it's easy to blame the automaker's closure for the collapse of the city, the reality is that Flint self-sabotaged. Flint has a poverty rate of over 40%, as well as one of the highest crime and murder rates in the country. And it all began with a grave mistake when the domestic automotive industry tanked because of Japanese competition. Thousands lost their jobs, with many relocating to more promising cities. After the 2008 crisis, Flint had its local authority stripped away by the state of Michigan, with emergency managers replacing municipal governments. Struggling with debt and declining revenue, the city switched from Detroit's water system to the Flint River, planning to send the untreated water through its aging pipes to residents, 42% of whom live below the federal poverty line. The water crisis stemmed in part from a spatial mismatch. Flint's infrastructure was too large for its shrinking population. As people left in search of better opportunities, many homes were abandoned, leaving aging pipes to deteriorate, both from time and disuse. But get this, although federal laws mandate that water should be treated to prevent corrosion, Flint's water went untreated. It contained between 2 and 10 times the Environmental Protection Agency's action level of lead. And in spite of having years to act, the local government failed to address the issue and even contributed to urban decline by encouraging flight from the city center. The end result? Painful rashes, hair loss, lead poisoning, and at least 91 cases of Legionnaire's disease, along with 12 deaths, have been reported to date. Yet it wasn't until September 2015 that state officials acknowledged lead contamination in the city's water was a danger to residents. But it was already too late. Flint's youngest residents are already showing signs of lead toxicity linked with long-term effects on learning and behavior. Charitable organizations and concerned individuals have donated and distributed thousands of gallons of bottled water, but residents still struggle to cook, clean, and keep themselves and their children healthy. Flint's decline is one of the most harrowing tales of Midwestern cities plagued with shrinking populations, unemployment, poverty, and hopelessness. Yet one town stands taller as the worst-case scenario of a once proud, solidly middle-class motor city fallen into ruin. We are, of course, talking about Number 2. Detroit, Michigan. Surprised to see Detroit on the list? Well, you shouldn't be. For decades, it's been one of the most striking examples of a city in decline. Like Flint, Detroit came to life during the boom of the auto industry, riding a wave of economic prosperity. But it fell for the same reasons: a sharp downturn driven by industrial restructuring, fierce competition from foreign automakers, and a mass exodus of residents to the suburbs. Sure, it shows signs of revitalization driven by urban development, new industries, and a renewed focus on attracting residents and businesses, but let's face it, the Motor City will never be the same again. By 2010, Detroit's population had declined by 61.4% from its 1950 peak, when it ranked as the 4th largest U.S. city behind New York, Chicago, and Philadelphia. The decline was driven by the lure of suburban life for middle-class white residents and the decentralization of the auto industry, sparking a broader exodus to both businesses and the middle class to surrounding suburbs. What remained were impoverished communities, often structurally blocked from accessing new economic opportunities, and a hollowed-out tax base. Consequently, Detroit's poverty rate surged dramatically from 14.9% in 1970 to 33.2% by 2021. The story of economic decline due to rapid industrial decentralization is common to other U.S. cities like Pittsburgh, St. Louis, and Cleveland. However, none have faced the level of residential and commercial abandonment that Detroit has experienced over the past 6 decades. So what exactly caused Detroit's steep downfall? Well, the city faced intense competition from foreign automakers, which offered more fuel-efficient and affordable cars, leading to declining demand for Detroit's products. This forced major car companies to cut jobs and close factories, further triggering widespread unemployment. A 2012 Detroit Future City report found that nearly 40 of Detroit's 139 square miles were vacant, meaning abandoned land makes up a third of the total land area of the city. But perhaps the most surprising stat is that between 2005 and 2015, 1 in 3 Detroit properties have been foreclosed, amounting to roughly 140,000. Detroit filed for Chapter 9 bankruptcy in 2013, marking the largest municipal bankruptcy in U.S. history at the time. In contrast, the city's debt, estimated between $18 and $20 billion, eclipsed the unwanted record previously held by Jefferson County, Alabama, which declared bankruptcy in 2011 with $4 billion in debt. But have things since improved? Well, not quite. Michigan's state debt has ballooned to approximately $43.84 billion in 2024, and there's hardly any indication that things will stop. Number 3. St. Louis. Practically speaking, the independent city of St. Louis functioned like a combined city-county government. It was the 8th largest U.S. city with 856,796 residents at its peak, larger than places like Seattle, Denver, or Boston even today. Now, it's a shadow of its former glory. St. Louis has suffered from a 65% population dip, even worse than Detroit's loss. The St. Louis region has stagnated, with its metro population declining every year. The staggering part is that the metropolis has lost a huge chunk of its business influence as key companies like Anheuser-Busch, McDonnell Douglas, and Ralston Purina were bought out and scaled back locally. TWA's acquisition led to the closure of its hub, and Southwestern Bell relocated to Texas. Take the city's downtown, for instance. Though home to over 280,000 residents, St. Louis has experienced a steady decline in recent years, prompting efforts to revitalize its shrinking downtown. Much of the challenge stems from a struggling real estate market, with industry outlet The Real Deal describing downtown St. Louis as having hit commercial rock bottom. And even worse, concentrated poverty, a measure of residents living in census tracts where over 40% of the population falls below the poverty line, affected more than 20% of St. Louis residents in 2016. That's over 65,000 people living in deeply disadvantaged neighborhoods. Nevertheless, the decline isn't exactly new. St. Louis has been steadily deteriorating for decades, with issues stemming from population loss, competition from newer suburban office developments, and flawed urban planning that left behind a surplus of bleak, empty buildings and wide, unsafe roads. Sure, tourism brings some visitors, but it's far from enough to offset the shrinking full-time population in the downtown area. It's a classic chicken and egg dilemma. People don't go there because there's nothing to do, and there's nothing to do because people don't go there. Number 4. Cleveland. Cleveland was once a city that felt unstoppable. Almost 1 million people called this industrial powerhouse home, earning it a spot as America's 6th largest city at its peak. But unlike the other cities we've talked about thus far, it wasn't just a single industry that defined Cleveland. Steel was a big hit, but the town also had good manufacturing, shipping, and a booming economy fueled by its prime location on Lake Erie. But like many Rust Belt cities, Cleveland's fortunes started to unravel slowly but surely. The manufacturing base began to erode a few decades shy of the millennium, with the factories and steel mills closing their doors. Widespread unemployment led to the collapse of the middle class, and by 2000, the population had shrunk in half. Here's the twist though, Cleveland didn't fall off a cliff solely because of a tanked economy. From 2000 to 2010, the city struggled through the transition and solely relied on healthcare to revive its downtown. A population has stabilized to around 370,000 in recent times, but the scars still remain. Economic inequality, vacancy, and poverty persist. Remember the subprime mortgage crisis in 2007? The bursting of the housing bubble led to widespread foreclosures, impacting Cleveland's real estate market and causing a decrease in the tax base. And then came the Great Recession of 2008. It ushered in increased unemployment, poverty, and further decline in the city's economy. And like that's not bad enough, Cleveland has lower rates of residents with college degrees compared to other Rust Belt cities. So yeah, Cleveland is definitely on an uphill drive, though nothing compared to the final city on this list. Number 5. Youngstown, Ohio. Unlike the likes of Cleveland, Youngstown was hardly ever a massive city. Her population peaked at around 170,000 people, each thriving on steel mills that powered America's post-war boom. It greatly suffered from the deindustrialization of Rust Belt cities in the 90s, with a well-documented implosion. Today, Youngstown has lost more than half of its population, a doom alarm given that the state of Ohio's population has continued to have a positive growth. Yes, the state of Youngstown's housing market has slowly improved in recent times, but there are still economic inequalities within the city, many of which are highly racialized. And how about the poverty rate from 2010 to 2020? It's nearly double that of both the county and the state. And then there's the issue of an uneven wealth distribution between renting and owning populations in the area. More than half of renters in Youngstown are cost-burdened, meaning they spend 30% or more of their income on housing, compared to just 20% of homeowners. And with racial disparities woven through that divide, it points to deeper structural inequities that can't be ignored, even in a city where housing costs seem low on the surface. Make no mistake, the city hasn't just lost jobs, it's lost hope for many. The population decline feeds into a vicious cycle. Fewer people mean less tax revenue, which means fewer resources to fix the very problems driving people away. And yes, we're yet to see the light at the end of the tunnel. Each of these towns stands as a stark reminder of how quickly stability can vanish, how a thriving place, a secure job, or even an entire way of life can unravel in what feels like an instant. So let me ask you, how safe is your town? If this story hits close to home, be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications to be in the loop for our upcoming videos. See you in the next one.